Welcome to the Rational Optimist Podcast. It's Thanksgiving week. We have a special episode, 5 things every rational optimist can be thankful for. He's Stephen McBride. I'm Dan Steinhardt. Go.
I love the intro. So, 60 Minutes, the famous American kind of, what would you call it, a docuseries, recently featured our favorite university, which we visited last week, the University of Austin, Texas, down in Austin. They did a segment titled Disruptor U. And for anyone that doesn't know, UATX is basically a new freedom of speech focused university. And you know what? I'll let you take us through what they covered. But I'm happy to say 60 Minutes got it right. This wasn't some hit piece, which we've seen in the past, and it's a big change. So I like the trajectory we're on.
I was expecting a hit piece too, but it was fair, balanced. It was, I got to hand it to 60 Minutes. They did a nice job with this. I mean, the core thing they said that they got right is that UATX, instead of DEI, they use MEI, which stands for Merit, Excellence, and Intelligence when selecting the kids that they admit to their university, and then all of the great stuff that flows from that, like a respect and a staunch defense of free speech, and they teach their lessons are like centered around Western civilization, Western values. Like they have classes that teach the meaning of the Bible, and not just religious, but like the Greek classics and that kind of stuff. So it's really a throwback to what college is supposed to be. And like you said, we visited last month, and it is as advertised. We probably met 10 people total, and the just curiosity and the passion and the mission-driven nature of everyone we met was very inspiring.
It was amazing. And look, I think when you hear new university, you might think, oh, it's kind of for these dropouts that can't get into the Ivy League. 60 Minutes highlighted in the episode, the students achieved on average, or were scored in the 92nd percentile of the SATs. So in the top 10% of scorers in the SATs. I think the new flex is you get into Harvard and you go to UATX instead. And it's basically a place where you can debate interesting ideas, and nothing is really off limits, because it's in the whole university was founded kind of like us, in the pursuit of truth, right? That's the kind of mission statement.
Yeah. So the main problem they're solving is the free speech issue, where at most Ivy League schools today, I think it's getting a little better, but for the last couple of years, I think it had gotten worse and worse, that there are select opinions you're allowed to have, ones that you're not, and then that's just it. The ones that you're not allowed to have get censored. That's the main problem they're solving, but they're solving a lot of problems of today's colleges, right? And one of them is the cost. So, I mean, everybody knows how tuitions have skyrocketed. UATX, its first class of students, which it just accepted this year, or they just started this year, they get a full ride. So they're going to be going to college for 4 years for free. And the campus is nice, but it's bare bones. There's no meal plans. There's no dorms. The kids live in apartments in Austin, and they have to cook for themselves. So I like that they're tackling the crazy expensiveness of college too.
Yeah, and yeah, that's something 60 Minutes mentioned, being lean, right? So just to give you some stats on this, the growth of administration has been one of the big reasons a college degree costs so much. So a study a couple of years ago, between 1976 and 2018, the number of students enrolled in US colleges went up 78%. The number of full-time administrators and other professionals employed jumped 164% and 452%. Yale now has more administrators than it does undergrad students, and it's kind of the same for the MITs and the Stanfords of this world. So I think UATX, we were there, we met lots of great people, but it wasn't like there was 10 administrators for every student, right? So I think it's showing that this can be done on a fairly tight budget.
Yeah, those stats you said even undersell it. If you take a specific case of a university like Stanford, since 1996, they've added 11,000 administrators.
Wow. So you live in a little town of Vermont. How many people live in your town?
5,000.
So two of your town now work at Stanford, or that's just the staff added.
Yeah.
You I think we've kind of, we'll show a chart on the screen here of college closures, and they've surged over the past decade, as you can see. I think we've kind of reached peak college in some ways, which is good. I feel like for the past 30 or 40 years, it was just open more colleges, send more kids to students. Now we're getting a little bit more selective about who goes to college. Is it worth going to college? I will predict, or you're actually already seeing it, the rise of discount colleges, and the fact that colleges are now, first of all, sticker price tuitions are falling, and then second of all, when you factor in all the grants and the and all that stuff, the what do you call them? What do you call them in America?
Scholarships.
Scholarships, that's the word. When you factor in all that, prices have collapsed. So I feel like when I see that, usually it's kind of like a sign that the boom, the great times are over. But obviously for colleges like UATX, things are only starting.
Yeah, the Ivies really, they coasted on their brand names and their prestige for a long time. And like under the surface, they hired all these people that didn't need to be there, and they jacked up costs as high as they could possibly go. And there's just been a sea change, I think, in even in public perception of them. That's why I was so happy to see that 60 Minutes didn't do a hit job. It pretty much featured UATX in a relatively flattering light. So I think UATX, it's still small. It's going to take a while to grow bigger, but it's influenced it's going to push the other colleges to get back to what they're supposed to be doing. Free speech, free inquiry, search for the truth, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You need the counterbalance, and we just got it. And the fact that it's basically aiming to be an elite college is very important, because many private universities, UATX is not for profit, but many for-profit private universities were started over the past couple of decades. I would argue none of them really succeeded, at least not in disrupting the Ivies. I think UATX is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and it will show people this can be done. So I expect UATX to kind of start a new way of in that sense of Ivy League competitors.
All right, thankful for UATX. You know what else I'm thankful for?
Tell me.
I'm thankful for President Milei of Argentina, the guy who campaigned with a chainsaw. He was on the Lex Friedman podcast recently. He had 2 hours to sit down, long-form conversation, explain who he is, where he comes from, what he believes. It's important because his public persona is a little
nutty.
A little nutty. Yeah. Yeah. A guy who campaigns with a chainsaw is a little nutty. So he inherited Argentina's economy, a complete disaster. It's even an understatement. Wholesale inflation was as high as 17,000%. He's been president for almost a year now, so we could kind of see how good of a job he's done. I would say he's done a pretty damn good job. He took wholesale inflation down from 17,000% a year to 28%. And I know you have some stats about how what he's done to housing affordability.
Yeah, just before we get there, I feel like Milei has talked very favorably of capitalism and freedom and free markets, and that's incredible, because where I come from, politicians generally don't espouse these values. They're usually saying how much free money they want to hand out and all these things. I just want to, one of the highlights, again, before we get to deregulation, was Lex asked him a question: when did you first understand the value of freedom, especially economic freedom? And he was basically looking at the same charts we are, the average GDP per capita over time. We can show that chart on the screen right now. And he basically looked at this and he said, wow, something amazing must have happened around 1800 or so for, wealth, incomes to be flat for again, 1800 years or whatever.
Yeah.
All of history, all of human history. Like your life was the same as your great grandfather's life, and then just this explosion. So he looked at this, he looked at the Industrial Revolution, and that basically kind of convinced him that freedom, free markets, capitalism, and economy and industry are the things that create human wealth and prosperity. One of the amazing things he has done, and very relevant for all of us living in Western countries right now, is essentially in Argentina you had these crazy rent control laws where tenancies were mandated. They had to be 3 years. Annual rent increases were capped at a certain percentage. You had to pay in pesos, all these restrictions. Of course, they were introduced under the guise of we want to help renters, evil landlords are price gouging. The result, of course, was predictable. 45% of landlords stopped renting and instead sold their properties. And because of basically you had to, if you were going to rent your property, you had to abide by all these restrictions. People just put them on Airbnb, short-term rentals, to skirt the rules. As a result was that way less houses on the market for rent. So rental prices went from 18,000 pesos per month at the end of 2019 to 334,000 pesos today. Vastly outpacing inflation. And of course, again, housing shortage hurt the people that it was meant to protect the most. Milei gets in. He obviously slashes these regulations. The supply of housing in Buenos Aires has tripled and rents have tumbled. I think they've been cut by 20 or 30% so far, and you can imagine they're going to fall even more.
This was never going to be an easy job for Milei. I believe he's one of the rare, genuine, authentic politicians. He said what he meant during his campaign, and he's trying his hardest to do it. Even so, he's got the socialists and Argentina's history all lined up against him. But so far, he's been steadfast, and I'm excited to see where this goes and how this continues. Argentina's stock market's been on fire, too.
Is it the best performing country ETF year today? It's up there, right?
It is up there. I always wonder if that stuff's adjusted for inflation or not. I guess if it's a US ETF in US dollars, it must be, yeah.
Yeah. It's in US dollars. You know, one of the things that our friend and colleague Olivier once said to me was that the US in the 70s was really bad. Like there was a lot to be negative about. The cities were on fire, crime waves, so on and so. Inflation was rampant, and then Reagan and Thatcher came in the early 80s, and things just seemed to change overnight. Obviously, the economic situation was still bleak, you could imagine, but just the vibes of everyone changed. And I feel like we're living through something similar now in Argentina. So very excited to see where it goes from here, and go Milei.
Yeah, one person can change it all. It was really Reagan's optimism that changed everything, right? As you pointed out, he didn't actually deregulate very much, but he talked about it in a good light, and then those that came after him did deregulate. So thankful for Milei, for sure.
Thankful for Milei. Thankful that 2024 became the year that people like us talking about how great nuclear energy, it went from controversial to consensus. So this was the year. You know, the Chinese have the year of the monkey and the year of the dragon. 2024 was the year of the nuclear renaissance. It was the year that the largest, most successful companies in the world started putting dollars behind nuclear energy. So what happened this year in nuclear energy then?
Oh, man, what didn't happen this year? It's so nice that we can talk to other people about this and not just ourselves about how much we love nuclear, right? The big tech companies they looked at how much demand, how much electricity and energy they're going to need to power their AI dreams, and they realized there's no possible way to get that much power without nuclear. So they have led a complete 180 on their attitudes towards nuclear. I think that's helped change the public's attitudes toward nuclear. And we've just gotten a waterfall of great news about nuclear power plants like 3 Mile Island are going to be restarting, desires to build more nuclear power plants, and probably most importantly of all, innovation happening in nuclear, talking specifically about SMRs or small modular reactors. There must be at least a dozen startups around the US like rapidly working to roll these things out. And just from a really high level, they're small. They can fit on the back of a truck. They can power 10,000 homes, and they do so with all the advantages of nuclear, which is clean, efficient, safe. Safe's a big one because nuclear technology these days is worlds safer than it was back in the day.
Yeah, fun little fact for you: nuclear power plants, everyone in America, are designed to withstand a plane crash. Okay, and if you just look at the stats, it's the safest source of power known to man. Shout out to Matt over at Allo Atomics, who we visited last time we were in Austin. He did a great experiment recently with Christian Keel, where they went to the University of Austin, not University of Austin, Texas, and they basically pulled out the control rods, the exact thing that meant to stop nuclear reactors melting down. They pulled them out, and basically modern nuclear technology is so safe, specifically this type of technology, that nothing happened. The system just automatically shut off. And just to give some people context, it's because of a special type of nuclear fuel called trigger fuel. So it basically cools itself down as the fuel heats up. So it's almost like you have meltdown.
Shuts itself down. Shuts itself down as the fuel heats up, right?
Shuts itself. Well, the nuclear reactor shuts itself down, but the actual fuel, the way the chemistry works, it actually gets cooler as the whole system heats up. So what you have to, Matt has said this on camera, that we have to find this technology, or this type of fuel, it's not proven to work in a commercial reactor. Okay, it's kind of like still experimental, but if we can get this to work, which I think we can, incredible breakthrough, because it basically makes nuclear reactors meltdown proof.
The biggest thing here, the biggest change, is an attitude change. We've had 50 years of completely frozen innovation in nuclear because it was essentially illegal. It was made so expensive to build a new nuclear reactor or tinker with an existing one that you could pretty much say, without much exaggeration, that innovation in nuclear was illegal. And it's completely changed. There was a sign at a college football game a couple of weeks ago saying make nuclear great again.
Amazing. And I think, the other big knock on nuclear, they say it's dirty, but it's really clean. They say it's dangerous, but it's really safe. The last one, which they do have a point on, is it's expensive. And these small modular reactors completely change that, because instead of having these big, huge one-off projects that cost $15 or $30 billion, now we can, Matt from Allo has talked about creating a factory where you can produce 100 small modular reactors per year. Just ship them out of the factory. The benefits of that is you make them in a factory, you learn how to make them better, faster, cheaper over time. So I'm going to predict 10 years after the first SMR is put in the ground, nuclear is going to be the cheapest source of energy known to man.
So Meta, Amazon, Microsoft are three of the big tech players that are investing heavily in nuclear. I heard something
Google's
about
in there as well.
Google too. What about NVIDIA? Do you know what they're doing around Diablo Canyon?
So NVIDIA recently signed some deal with Diablo Canyon, which is California, I think's last remaining nuclear power plant, to put an AI data center inside the nuclear power plant. It's kind of like BYOB, bring your own bills. Like, this is BYOP, bring your own power. So there's been this trend around, hey, let's put the data center beside the nuclear power plant. There's been some pushback against that recently. Meta was trying to do it, and because of some species of rare bee, the environmental laws got in the way. Amazon got shut down too on one of its projects. NVIDIA is saying, hey, let's put the AI data center inside the nuclear power plant. So it's kind of like it's getting around the rules. So expect more of this stuff.
A data center inside a nuclear power plant. We're definitely we're in the future.
In the future, it's and yeah, just back to what you said at the start. This really is, for many decades, because electricity generation hasn't really grown in America. It's been anemic. We could kind of pretend that nuclear was dangerous and all these things. Now that AI and other technologies are going to spike energy demand, we're kind of like, you no longer have that luxury to say nuclear is dangerous. So an AI-fueled nuclear renaissance, as we predicted over a year ago now.
Number 4 thing I am thankful for, and I know you are too, is DOGE, the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. So I'm sure everybody's heard of these guys by now and what their plan is. Cut the federal government wherever possible. They're going to cut spending, which we looked at in our last episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago. It's going to be tough to cut meaningful amounts of money, like meaningful in terms of percentage of the federal budget. It's going to be tough to cut a lot of that just because so much of it is entitlements. It's good, it's needed, but the part we're excited about is actually cutting the red tape, cutting the parts of the federal government that have regulated the U.S. economy to death and have prevented innovation.
A very important distinction. Because I love this concept, but it's an awful name. Efficiency, I don't know. Efficiency is like, I don't know. It's kind of very focused on the spending. If you look on Twitter, It's also a lot of the posts. It's a lot about the spending and the commentary is on the spending, not what it's about. So by some estimates, as you said, the red tape, America would be twice as wealthy if we hadn't mired ourselves in red tape. And just to give you two examples very quickly, you have these crazy zoning laws which make it impossible to build housing in America's biggest city. So I'll show you a chart on the screen right now. So it's land use regulations. So basically the amount of laws around where you can build houses, what type of houses you can build, how much land. And you can see that in the blue line, it's gone way, way, way up. And then the gold line is homes, starter homes, basically as a percent of all new home sales. And you'll see as the regulations went up, the starter homes went down. And that's because it's made it so expensive to build starter homes that all the builders just go build upmarket homes, which hurts the people at the lower end the most, makes housing less affordable. I'll give you another stat. New York City built more houses in the 1920s than it did in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s combined. And that is all back to just how difficult it's made to build regulations. So if you care about inequality and you care about social mobility, people being able to, go from Kansas to living in California, this is something that we need to fix, and that's what we need DOGE for, to scale back all these incredibly harmful laws.
That's such a good point. It's a take you never really hear, in that if you're a young, ambitious 22-year-old, there's like a handful of cities around the United States that you should be in. You should be in Austin, San Francisco, New York. It's where all the stuff happens. It's where you're going to meet the people who are making stuff happen. And people can't afford to live in these places, with the exception of Austin, because they actually have a good pro-growth, pro-building housing policy. But young kids that don't make much money cannot afford to live in San Francisco or New York. And it's solely because these places don't build new housing. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
You know, Brian Kaplan, the George Mason economist, wrote a great book on this, Build Baby Build. He walked through all these arguments, but there is actually data showing, hey, in the 60s, it was worth, if you were a janitor from Oklahoma or whatever, Mississippi, a lower income state, it was worth your while to move to a San Francisco. Now, because rent eats up so much of your paycheck, it's no longer worth it. So it really, really hurts social mobility in America. I was just remembered of a funny story. You told me the first place you lived when you moved to New York, you had to share a room with some communist or something, right? They used to have communist meetings in the in the living room.
That is very true. I lived in Sunnyside, Queens, with two roommates that I met on Craigslist. They were two middle-aged women, and one of them was a communist. She had some communist newspaper on the kitchen table. And one day I came home and there were like 12 people sitting in our living room, all in a circle. And I just walked by them and I can kind of hear them from my room. And they were talking about like worker struggles and communism. I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here.
Well, they didn't convert you. But yeah, I would just say, look, time is of the essence. You only have a certain amount of time to change things over these, Trump's 4-year term or whatever. Don't waste your time trying to cut $1 million here and $1 million there. You really want to focus on cutting the red tape. And if you can do that, I think we can get an economic sonic boom, right? I really think we could.
Yes, but I could tell you the headlines in 6 months. I could already tell you what they're going to be. They're going to claim that DOGE was a failure because it only cut $300 billion out of the federal budget, when the federal budget is $6 trillion. And that's not the point. The point is to get rid of the regulations and, frankly, the people with the attitudes that get in the way of innovation and enforce the regulations. Get them out of there. Clear the way for the entrepreneurs and the thinkers and the doers and the innovators to make America a better place.
Two last things on this, Dan, and you tell me what you think about this. The number one reason I'm bullish on America is because for the first time in my lifetime, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the doers in society are stepping up to the plate and saying enough is enough. I have to go into government. I have to get my hands dirty. Whether that's obviously Elon Musk, his new energy secretary, Chris Wright. Joe Lonsdale has talked about it. Peter Thiel has been close to Trump for a long time. Mark Andreessen and Naval recently, Ravikant, the Silicon Valley venture capitalist, among other things, has said he's volunteered for public service. And I think this is a very important change. How long is it? When was the last time that you heard someone be excited about going into government, about working in the public sector? I think we actually might be seeing that change right now.
It does feel like a tipping point happened where the people who just want to be left alone, the people who just want to build their companies and be left alone, finally had to get involved. And the lineup you just gave, Lonsdale, Thiel, Musk, Andreessen, Naval, I think they all fit that category. They don't really want to have to worry about the government, but it's grown so powerful and so burdensome that they do, and they're finally taking action.
Exactly. And the last thing, transparency is one hell of a disinfectant. I think Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who head the Department of Government Efficiency, they're taking the right approach. They said they're going to post a leaderboard of the worst regulations or the worst ways your tax dollars are being spent on Twitter. They're also launching a podcast called the DOGE Cast, essentially an update on what they're doing, what they're finding. I think this is very important to get the public behind you. You just said the headlines in 6 months will be, negative. I think you now with Twitter and YouTube, you can kind of go direct to the public and tell them, hey, here's what's really going on. So this is a way to win the public over, and I think to make an outsized impact.
They should read last week's Rational Optimist Diary, because we outlined a lot of the most ridiculous regulations that stop growth and innovation, like the desert tortoise. A couple 100 desert tortoises were a reason the largest solar farm in the U.S. couldn't be built. You mentioned the rare bees stopping Meta from its nuclear ambitions. There was a third environmental one. I forget what it was.
The third environmental one, it was the desert. Oh, the Elon Musk and the seal and SpaceX. That.
How could I forget the seal?
Talking of SpaceX and the seal, it did not get in the way of SpaceX's sixth launch of its skyscraper-sized rocket, Starship. So I think hands down, the achievement of 2024, the pinnacle of human innovation, was Elon and his team of SpaceX engineers shooting the skyscraper-sized rocket into space and then catching it with a pair of chopsticks. And they didn't do the catch again, but they had their sixth successful launch last weekend, right?
Every time they do a launch, they get a little bit better. They solve another problem. So this one, actually, something went wrong. The automated software on board warned them that something wasn't going to work if they went into the chopsticks and got their rocket caught by the arm. So they landed it in the ocean. And I think it damages the rocket a little bit, but it's still reusable. And every time we talk about it, we have to remind people why what Elon's doing is so important. Just decreasing the cost of going to space by 98%. And if you want to think about why that's so important, it's imagine every time you took an airplane, you had a parachute out of it and it crashed before you landed, and they had to build a new airplane. The only people who would ever be able to fly are billionaires and people associated with governments. But the fact that we can reuse our planes means that average people can fly. And so Elon Musk is attempting to do the same thing, and I think he's going to succeed for space travel.
100%. I mean, this is really the Roger Bannister of innovation. I think there's something incredibly powerful about seeing a skyscraper-sized rocket blast off and then it land itself. And he's just showing people that it's possible to do really hard things. And I think SpaceX will single-handedly create the space economy. I mean, as you said, it's reduced the cost by 98%. NASA has given a contract to put people back on the moon, and then as soon as Elon is basically going to launch a cargo ship, and it's a Mars-bound cargo ship. It's going to carry 100 tons at a time, and you know what? I think before we say goodbye to the world, we're going to have humans living on Mars if Starship is successful.
Well, we're alive?
Yes.
Wow. Does that mean you think we're going to live to like 200 years old, or you think it's going to happen that quickly?
I think within 50 years.
On Mars?
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I hope you're right.
I hope so. I'm maybe being a little bit optimistic, but you got it right. It's the Rational Optimist Podcast. I will on the topic of time frames. I don't know if any of you remember something called Sombrita. It was essentially these specially shaded bus stops in LA. The shaded bus stops took as much time as it did to design, build, and launch a skyscraper-sized rocket. I think it's just a perfect example between government bureaucracy and actual innovators moving fast.
Yeah, we have a lot of examples of that.
Yeah. So, and you know what? One of my favorite pieces written this year, since we're almost in year-end mode, was Tim Urban, who writes the excellent blog Wait But Why. He wrote a great piece in the Free Press called Why I Brought My Toddler to Watch SpaceX's Flying Skyscraper. Encourage everyone to read it, but one line that really resonated with me, and I think, important for what we're doing, he said, I can't shield my daughter from the negativity, but I can continually redirect her attention to the rocket, showing her all the ways our species is incredible. I just thought it was a great line.
I love it. Tim's great. If you like Tim, you should read his book, What's Our Problem? One of the better books I've read over the last couple of years.
You wanna wrap with a dose of optimism?
Yes.
An oldie. I have an oldie but a goodie for you today. So my third child was just born, and on the screen right now you can see the long run history of child mortality. And for many, many, many years, basically 1 in 2 children died before they reached their 15th birthday. And now it's less than 1 in 5, and in developed countries it's 0.3%. That's how many kids die before their 15th birthdays. So this is something that I think we all take for granted these days, but it's just important to remember it was not always like this, and I hope this trend continues improving so none of us have to experience that tragedy.
Did everything go smooth with your kid's birth?
Everything went smooth. Shauna did it like a champion, no pain, medication. This one was a lot quicker than the other ones, so I was very happy. I was timing the contractions. I was saying that's probably going to be another 12 hours. The whole thing happened in 4 hours. So thank you God, and just incredibly blessed.
All right, love to hear it. Viewers, you can boost our optimism by hitting the subscribe button, ringing that bell, and leaving us a comment. This greatly helps our channel grow. We appreciate all of your support, and we'll see you next week.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.